For the development of any nation, rail has always been at the forefront. At the moment, in Australia, especially in New South Wales, we are the laughing stock of the world when it comes down to transport.
Just before the line was closed, there was a major re-sleepering program done. There were bridge building and repairs.
This rail is actually in very good condition. Even though we are standing on a straight piece of track, this rail shows very little signs of wear.
9,000 people came to the opening of the railway, and it was called the Line from Nowhere to Nowhere because it was our train for our region. Hi, today we're going to talk about the Casino to Murwillumbah railway line. When I talk to people in our community, I often find that they've given up on ever having the train back, and they feel quite despairing about it. They've been told that the cost is way too high and it's unaffordable, and that the condition of the line is really bad. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the costings and question them, and we're also going to have a look at the condition of the line and talk about that as well.
My name is Neil Battersby, and I'm a former locomotive engineman and test driver for Connex trains in Melbourne. Construction of the Murwillumbah line began in Lismore in April 1891, and by May 1894 the first train ran from Lismore to Mullumbimby. The line through to Murwillumbah was completed on the 24th of December of the same year. The construction of the line from Lismore to Murwillumbah is a distance of just under 99 kilometres. This involved the construction of 116 bridges and 8 tunnels, and took 3 years and 8 months to complete using the technology of the day, which was very hard labour, using bullock teams. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, I had the privilege and permission to do an 8mm film on this line. 2 very well-known and loved trains, the Gold Coast Motor Rail and the North Coast Overnight Express. In the first year of operation, this new service had 25,000 bookings from Murwillumbah alone. In 7 years down the track, it was taking a staggering 51,000 bookings, an increase of 26,000. Remember that these figures are for Murwillumbah only, and does not include the bookings from Mullumbimby, Byron Bay, Bangalow, Lismore or Casino. In addition, it had the capacity of removing some 14,600 vehicles off our roads annually by the 2 car carrier wagons. The cost of operating this service per year was close to $11 million, yet its average yearly financial return was an astonishing $22.5 million. This service was so popular that in 1978 another service was introduced to cater for the demand of the public. The combination of these 2 services catered for over 1,600 passengers daily. Mr. Neil Morris was the North Coast Marketing Manager for the Railways based at Grafton, and was the driving force behind the introduction of the Gold Coast Motor Rail and the Pacific Coast Overnight Express. He was also responsible for increasing freight services on the Murwillumbah line, but on Christmas Eve 1980 he was sacked for doing so. Councillor Tom O'Connor said that he had it on good authority that a senior officer who had embarrassed the Commission by attracting too much business would get the bullet. In the early months of 1990, both of these services were replaced with the XPT, with a seating capacity of only 434. The seating capacity of the former 2 services was 1,600. The XPT effectively ran as a night service through the region, severely reducing the capability of local usage as a type of commuter service like the former Motor Rail and Overnight Express, resulting in a drop of patronage. When Queensland's South Coast Railway line reached Tweed Heads in 1903, there were immediate calls from local members of the Parliament of New South Wales to extend the Murwillumbah line another 18 miles or 29 kilometres to Tweed Heads so the 2 railways could meet. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Works examined the proposal but narrowly voted against it in 1904. There were 3 other proposals to extend the railway to Tweed Heads before the idea was dropped in 1928. The people who put forward these proposals had the foresight for the future of the area and the population growth of the region. If this line was extended back then, it would be an integral and important portion of this region's infrastructure today. In 1858, there was a legislation passed in Parliament to form a Board of Commissioners with a Chief Commissioner to run the railway. Part of that act stated that there was to be no political interference with the Commissioners. The Chief Commissioner was answerable to Parliament. The work of the Board of Commissioners and the Commissioner himself enabled this state to have a world-renowned rail system. Rail was there to build this country, to build this state, and to maintain it. Things were going fine until political pressure started to interfere. And it interfered very slowly, but very deliberately into the system. Trucking companies, bus companies, they don't build their roads. They only go on them. They don't maintain the roads. But with the railways, they built them, they purchased the land, they built the bridges, they made the tunnels, they built the trains, and they maintained them. All of that industry here in Australia now, especially New South Wales, is virtually gone. Road lobbyists meet the politicians, pay to their political parties for favours for them.
I think it's lousy, very lousy.
Well, I think it's crazy. I think they shouldn't have let it go the way that it's gone. There's more trucks on the road now, there's more accidents.
It's a bit depressing, especially as we are a rural town and it's nice to connect into, Brisbane.
When the line closed in 2004, I just thought, what a shame. Apparently it's unaffordable. It just didn't ever occur to me for a moment. Politicians might lie or be dishonest about something.
It served us well for 100 years, and by goodness, this railway service should continue to serve us in the future, shouldn't it? Yeah! Absolutely!
Public transport is a public service and it shouldn't ever be meant to make money. The trains in Sydney don't make money.
If the Queensland Government gets the logic of extending its rail service south to the Gold Coast, I don't understand why Labor doesn't get the message about the need for a Casino-Mooloolaba link that goes well beyond Mooloolaba.
We've put $75 million on the table and we've said if the federal government matches that dollar for dollar, we'll immediately commence the work to reopen the track.
They're going to rip out a lot of the lights, where they're going to basically disable the track to be used. I mean, this is vandalism of the first order.
Here we have a government that wants to take away what little we do have. Shame on them.
More trains, less cars!
All this protests, all this good-meaning intent by the locals of the North Coast means zip, it seems, to Michael Costa or to Bob Carr. I mean, we should be getting more people onto rail off roads.
Well, the Coalition is determined to reopen the Casino-Mooloolaba rail line, not just to provide a commuter service, but also because of the economic benefits it can provide to the area.
Every election after that, the Nationals talked about how cheap they could bring the train back and how they'd definitely bring the train back when they got into power. And so then, of course, when they got into power, I was thinking, oh, isn't it great? We're going to get our train back. The next thing we hear, they're saying that it's unaffordable as well, and it's going to cost $953 million to reinstate the train. And there was a Greens MP from Sydney came up, and she told us that they were reinstating trains in Victoria for $265,000 per kilometre. And the Arup report, which said, our train was going to cost $953 million, that works out to approximately $7 million per kilometre. At that moment, it hit me that we'd been lied to. After Sydney and Melbourne, this region is the most visited area for domestic tourism in Australia. We have 4.6 million tourists per year. However, tourism wasn't even mentioned in the Arup report. The Arup report states the main reason for the initial closure of the Casino to Mooloolaba Railway was the population of the Northern Rivers is proportionately older than the rest of New South Wales, and this demographic are less likely to have access to a car. This region also has proportionately the highest number of unemployed people in New South Wales. They and those under 18 are also less likely to have a car. Those without a car will be the main users of public transport, and most passengers will have concession fares. Therefore, the Arup report says cost recovery is unlikely to improve even with increased patronage. Also, there are very many sick people who can't get their healthcare needs met in Lismore. They have to go to Brisbane or the Gold Coast and they can't drive. The buses take hours and are an exhausting experience for a sick person. Many elderly people and poor people are stuck at home, and social isolation is a constant element in research on illness and death. So basically the Labor government of the day closed our railway line because we had a lot of people who needed public transport.
I just can't understand them taking the trains away. I just don't like them taking them away. What am I going to do?
I got involved in a group called the Northern Rivers Railway Action Group because I want the community to know that we can afford our railway line. There are so many reasons why it's good for our community. And we've been doing the market stalls for years now, and so many people come up and talk about how much they'd like to have the train back. It's really popular.
Ideally, the best part to start out with would be reopening a line between Casino and Lismore, allowing this area of Lismore as a central hub for the area to have transport back by rail either to Sydney or turn right at Casino and go to Brisbane.
A company called Elements of Byron are putting a train on the track at Byron Bay on 3 kilometres of track for $1 million. That works out to about $330,000 per kilometre. And again, we have to ask ourselves, how can the Arup report be saying that the railway line would cost over $7 million per kilometre when we've got that to compare with? There was a new railway line built between Darwin and Alice Springs. It was 1,420 kilometres and it cost $1,200 million, which works out to $845,000 per kilometre. And it was a brand new railway line that went across several rivers, through inhospitable terrain. There was something like 1,500 culverts, and it cost nowhere near $7 million. So if we actually compare how much the Casino to Murwillumbah line would be if we costed it the same as the Darwin Railway, it would work out to almost $110 million. And if we costed it using the amount that the Elements of Byron train is costing, which is $330,000 per kilometre, it comes out at $42,900,000. Of course, the Arup report estimates the cost at $953 million. It's staggering the amount of difference. It just seems as if we've been lied to.
Arup, sure, they're in the construction business, but not rail construction. I firmly believe that this line could be re-established again for rail services, including some freight, for less than half of that. But a lot of people, when they read the report, fail to read the very front page. And it states on that, at the bottom, this report takes into account the particular instructions and requirements of our client. It is not intended for and should not be relied upon by any third party, and no responsibility is undertaken to any third party. In other words, it was written under the instructions of the government. Remember what I was saying before about the Board of Commissioners and the political interference? There's a classic example of political interference. There's an example of lobbyists, road lobbyists, trucking lobbyists, paying enormous amounts of funds as donations to get what they want.
The Greiner government in 1988 commissioned Booz Allen and Hamilton consultants to prepare a report into New South Wales rail services. On purely economic grounds, the report recommended closing all country passenger services as unprofitable. However, there was a public outcry. After the rail service closed in 2004, the Arup Group was commissioned to do a study on the Tintin Bar to Ewingsdale upgrade. In 1992, Greiner became a board member of Balderstone Road Building Company. Between 1998 and 2010, Balderstone donated over $655,000 to the major parties. Barry O'Farrell appointed Nick Greiner as Chairman of Infrastructure New South Wales in May 2011, and in August 2011, Balderstone was awarded the $862 million contract for the highway upgrade. In September 2011, Transport New South Wales commissioned the Arup Group to do the rail study, which was released in 2013, recommending against rail services purely on economic grounds. In 2013, Nick Greiner resigned from Infrastructure New South Wales after 2 years as chair. The motorway lobby has donated more than $13 million to the major parties over 15 years. These donations have coincided with federal and state governments approving billions of dollars to major road projects built by these companies.
Our politicians are elected to serve the people, not the party and not the lobby groups, and not individual corporations. They are there for you, not them. And you've got to make that point clear to your local member.
Just about all the branch line has 1 in 4 steel sleepers, and in some cases it's 1 in 3. As we have here, it's like 8 steel sleepers to 1 timber. Most of the branch line has a very good formation of ballast, as you can see here. The track has been heavily ballasted over the last 20 years of its working life. Even though we are standing on a straight piece of track, this rail shows very little signs of wear.
Despite the fact that it's got a little bit of rust on it, run a train over the top, it'll be back to shiny metal in no time.
So at 47 kgs per metre, this today is regarded as modern heavy railway line, which was taking locomotives of up to 110 tonnes before closure.
The bridges is where there is some cost involved. Jeff Clark, the railway engineer from the Byron train, estimates that if all the bridges need concrete piers, then reinstatement of the line is likely to cost $2 million to $2.5 million per kilometre. At the most, this works out to $325 million for the whole line, which is a third of the Arup estimate.
It is a credit to those who maintained this line in its latter days before services were ceased. In New South Wales we have many major regional centres: Bathurst, Dubbo, Tamworth, Armidale, Wagga Wagga, Albury. All these places, all these major regional areas have rail services still going to them, except one, and that is Lismore. So why not re-establish the line back to Lismore, and let's get the ground starting to roll again for services back up to Murwillumbah and even extension on to the Gold Coast. In Queensland they have the Kuranda Railway, an enormous tourist attraction. Puffing Billy, which I've visited many times, very popular. The Pitchie Ritchie Railway in South Australia. This line, the Casino to Murwillumbah Rail Corridor, has that potential. Many locals in our area would have noticed a dramatic increase in road traffic. And this trend, unfortunately, is set to continue and get even worse. Our councils are struggling to maintain the roads, full of potholes and jagged edges, creating damage to your own vehicles.
The COAG Road Repair Program has explicitly stated that it does not intend to include social costs such as traffic congestion, air pollution, carbon emissions and road accidents in the pricing reform process.
The Northern Star, one of our local newspapers, on the 9th of July 2015 published an article that within a 31-hour period in this area there were 8 major road accidents, 9 hospitalised and unfortunately 2 deaths. It's important that this line be reopened to rail services to reduce the amount of accidents and damage done to our roads. I firmly believe in an integrated transport system, and that's what this area desperately needs.
One of the reasons why we believe it's important to bring the railway back into use is because it'll cut carbon emissions hugely. The Deloitte report of 2011 states that Australia is now the most intensive user of road freight in the world, and it has the least energy efficient road passenger transport among members of the International Energy Association. Road travel produces more than 40% more carbon pollution than rail travel for each kilometre travelled by a passenger. A national government report in 2014, The Bottom Line on Energy Efficiency, says rail freight emits 75% less greenhouse gas emissions per tonne of freight moved compared to the road freight transport sector. If we had a reliable commuter railway service in the Northern Rivers that was available and had good timetabling for people going to work, for shopping, health appointments, study, there are so many ways in which ordinary people would be saved money and would benefit. Taxpayers in this area are not getting the same services as those in Sydney.
There are those in our community who would like to see this rail line turn into a rail trail. The people who are trying to get the rail services back for you don't have those interests, except you, the community, because we feel that rail is vitally important to sustain the society that we now have and to advance it.
It is clear the government's preference is to rip up the existing rail line and effectively privatise the corridor for a rail trail. The effect of this decision would be to permanently shut off the ability to use this corridor, which links many of our region's major centres and important tourism locations for passenger rail services. From a tourism perspective, restoring a rail service makes significant economic sense for our region and can deliver both visitors and local people travelling for jobs. The Greens are not opposed to a tourist bike trail running alongside the rail corridor and the new opportunities for tourism and recreation that a multimodal rail corridor would bring. But to rip up an important piece of community infrastructure, particularly while there is still no real plan to invest in a public transport strategy for the next 50 years in our region, would be a retrograde step.
For this line here, the Casino Mooloolaba Rail Corridor could become a great tourist attraction. This area has 4.6 million visitors a year. Don't you think that they'd like to have a service to ride on, to visit our areas? We can incorporate integrated transport with minibuses to go out to the smaller regions. It's a very picturesque area, the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, and it really needs a rail service to bring it forward.
So there are indeed a great many reasons why this region needs and deserves an effective commuter rail service as part of an integrated public transport system.
There's every reason to run the trains again.
Remember that when you travel on a train, you are travelling 200 times safer than what you are on a road.
But the overall aim of the Northern Rivers Railway Action Group is to reinstate the whole service of the Casino to Mooloolaba line and then extend it up to the Gold Coast, which is only about 22 kilometres.
Biodiesel motors are run on macadamia. Oil that comes from growing trees, locally sustained.